Hi, my name is Michael Seiler, and I'm here to share with you the results of a study that we published in the Journal of Real Estate Finance and Economics. The title of our study is Exploring the Foreclosure Contagion Effect Using Agent-Based Modeling. So let me start with a couple of definitions. What does it mean when I say foreclosure contagion? So imagine a neighborhood, and inside that neighborhood you have one home who has stopped paying their mortgage. They've defaulted on their mortgage. And after the default, the lender comes after them and they force a foreclosure in order to take back that property. So what happens there is that when an appraiser comes and another person puts their house up for sale, they do a sweep of the neighborhood and they say, within a certain range, within the last 6 months, what type of home sales do we have? Now, if only one home has gone into foreclosure, they tend to sell at a discount, maybe 10% or so. It's not really going to affect that next person's value, your neighbor who is putting his house up for sale. One single foreclosure is not going to bring it down because the appraiser can say, look, that was not a typical transaction, and so it really hasn't happened anywhere else. It's an anomaly, so we can really discount that. It's not a big deal. But as a second foreclosure happens in your neighborhood, the appraiser has to consider, oh, maybe this is more of the market and I do need to consider it. A third, a fourth, and a fifth, and it really does become a significant part of the market that the appraiser is not going to be able to ignore. So foreclosure contagion simply means that as more and more homes in your surrounding area go into default and eventually foreclosure, it absolutely has a negative impact on your home. Now you might say, so what? It has a negative impact. I don't need to sell. But here's what we find with strategic mortgage defaulters. Strategic mortgage defaulters are people who, although they can pay their mortgage, decide not to. And if you look at the number one reason why people strategically mortgage default, the necessary condition is that they have negative equity. Negative equity just means that here's how much I owe on the home and here's how much the home is worth. So if I were to try to sell it today, I'd have to come out of pocket to make up the difference because I sell the home for, let's say, $160,000, but I owe the lender $200,000. And that doesn't even consider realtor fees. So being underwater makes people feel like their home is a bad investment. And even though you can easily make the argument that they should stay in the home because prices will rebound and of course their mortgage balance will eventually decline as they continue to make mortgage payments, even though eventually they'll come out of this negative equity, people still feel like at this point my home's a bad investment, so I'm going to walk away. So foreclosure contagion describes both of these things. It describes the process where the appraiser says your home is worth less, and it also describes the process of where more people are going to be incentivized, either rightfully or wrongly, to walk away from their home. And so you can see how that downward spiral would just get more and more dramatic, kind of like a wave crescendoing on the beach. So that's foreclosure contagion. Now let me explain the second part of our study. Agent-based modeling, what exactly is that? Well, agent-based modeling is a graphical rendering of an environment. It is a fictitious environment using game theory concepts where you can test theories for how to get us out of this foreclosure contagion without doing real damage. So without using a safe agent-based modeling environment, the government would be required to unleash an idea, a concept, something they think would work on an actual neighborhood or within an actual city. And if they're wrong about their planned solution, well, people are going to lose their house, neighborhoods are going to spiral down, it's going to be a complete economic disaster. So what we propose is the testing of very dangerous economic ideas in an environment where if we're wrong, nothing bad happens because these aren't real homes, they're not real people. So it basically provides us with a safe laboratory. So we teamed up with folks who are experts in this area. And what the folks did is they built a grid. They built a grid with 2,500 homes inside the neighborhood. And within this neighborhood, we start off by letting time tick. Each month is one time step. So this is, in many senses, a discrete model. So in each step, one period of time goes by. We recalculate the amortization schedule on the home. We update the model with measures of inflation, measures of unemployment, and things like that. We take it from actual economic data. And then what we do is we want to see if home prices start to spiral, what can we do to stop them from spiraling out of control and completely crashing the home prices or the economic environment within that neighborhood. And here's what we focus on. We have a tremendous number of variables, as you might imagine. In fact, the number of calculations over our 1,000-month time step, or roughly 83 years, we have billions and billions, literally billions of calculations that go on. Each home has its own amortization table. Each home each month has to decide, do I post my property for sale, and so forth. There's a very complicated list that you can read about in our study. But in terms of a high-level overview, here's what we focus on. We focus on something called disposition time, and we focus on something called the foreclosure discount. Disposition time, to dispose of something, means to get rid of it. So if you have a home that goes into default and eventual foreclosure, does it make sense for you to resolve that foreclosure very quickly? In other words, how would you resolve it? You can either work out a loan modification with the current borrower, or you can just say, look, we're taking the home back from you, we're selling it to a new person, and that new person will get a loan that they can afford to pay and hopefully not default like you did. So that's one way that you can resolve it. The other thing that we focus on is the foreclosure discount. So in our model, we don't try to hypothesize how much your neighbor's home goes down in value when you default. The benefit is that there have been a couple other studies that look at that. So what we did is we took the range of values that they found in those other studies, some as few as a 1% drop in your price, some up in the 10 or 11% drop in your price. And we used that range in order to plug into our model and see how sensitive the model is to variables like that. Now, most people are going to think that the model is going to be most sensitive to this foreclosure discount. Obviously, the steeper the drop in your neighbor's price when you default, the more dangerous this is going to be, the quicker this is going to collapse your market. And while it is an incredibly significant variable, it's actually foreclosure time that does the most damage. And that's actually good from a policymaker perspective, because if you are a policymaker, you really can't change the economic impact of one person foreclosing and the economic result it has on the other. That's not something you can directly control, but you can absolutely speed up the foreclosure process. And you can have it to where a foreclosure can be met with expediency and not dragged on in courts for years and years and years. We find that if you allow this to drag on for years and years, you can very quickly collapse a market. However, if you resolve the foreclosures in, let's say, a 3-month period, it's going to be very, very hard for anything like this to collapse an economic market. So our major takeaway is, look at the states who have a very streamlined process, states like Virginia, very streamlined, and then compare that to states like Florida, where people have been living in their home for 4 or 5 years without paying their mortgage, and they haven't been forced out yet. Places like Florida have experienced dramatic negative impacts. Places like Virginia, not nearly as bad. So that's our major policy recommendation. For more information, please see our study. Thank you.